Sort of this icebreaker,
Right.
you know, of pop art, and so they were, and Andy was right there at the beginning.
Yep, he sure was.
You know, it was a very interesting time. I was very, as a kid. Oh, this is the thing, because I remember what's pop art. My introduction to pop art was like Life magazine.
Well, as was. Well, truthfully, see, when I was a little boy, my grandmother would get Life magazine, and
Right.
I would go over to her house. So, sorry, telling this story now, I feel like I'm telling a story from like the 1940s.
Yeah, it is.
It
It's
almost
so
seems
long
it
ago.
almost seems that there should be like. I almost have this mental image. There should be this big overstuffed chair. On one side of it, a reading lamp, and on the other side, an enormous cathedral radio. That's almost what it seems like. Okay.
Yeah.
Take away the cathedral radio.
Yes.
You've got a big overstuffed chair, a reading lamp, and a pile of fresh Life magazines.
Yeah.
Well, I would plunk myself down on that, and that's how. I had never heard of Elton John until I saw an article about Elton John in Life magazine, that here was this crazy frizzy-headed guy that was just selling out these stadiums.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was the same thing. There's so many things that
It was your beginning.
That was how you saw us.
That is how you got the world. See, because we got Life magazine, we got Look, which was great because there was the editorial slant of Look was so different than Life. It was much more sort of like sensational.
Well,
like
a
the
little bit
best
more.
stuff on flying saucers was always in Look magazine.
Well, you know what I have? I have a Look magazine from 1968, and it's the Beatles, it's the Maharishi, the Beatles, and Mia Farrow all sitting around at the ashram. That's what the cover is. Yeah, the Beatles, Maharishi, and Mia Farrow.
This was my, because we had all of them. And there was this article, I do believe that it was in the Saturday Evening Post.
Which I remember.
It said, the Beatles are coming. And then there was this, the article, the expanded article, was basically, it was, of course, it focused on the Beatles because the Beatles were just breaking in the United States. But they gave a lot of, like, real estate in the magazine to the other Mercy Beat and Liverpool bands. And I was looking at this as like an 8-year-old kid, and I thought the Beatles, it was collectively about this whole thing. They were all Beatles, kind of like beatniks.
Right.
And I just was really, really intrigued by this. And then, of course, then the Beatles, like, did the beachhead in the United States. And I remember this so clearly. Being at my grandmother's house on the day, that fateful day, Sunday night, that the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember we were just getting ready to leave and go home because we had been having dinner with my grandmother. And then the Beatles were on.
Yeah.
And I remember just standing in the living room. I already had my coat on. And I'm just like perplexed. I don't know what I'm looking at.
Well, it's just some guys on a black and white TV set.
Yeah, it was
Here's Ed Sullivan.
on a sort of a Zenith television, like on legs, in my grandmother's living room, and of course, then all the information started coming in so fast and furious. We all got up to speed very quickly what the Beatles were, and basically, it was this moment that just sort of like, and this is what I tell a lot of people: you don't know. No, I said, there are pop sensations today, but you do not understand how this shifted culture.
Well, and you know what? And let me throw this out there. There is yet another streaming service that I got hooked into. I signed up for Hulu only because there was some show that Shem and I wanted to see. Okay, whatever, $5 a month. There is this documentary on Hulu. It's actually a Ron Howard documentary about the Beatles when they came to tour the United States the first time. And this is something I've often told my friend Danny, trying to explain to people how huge the Beatles were.
It's
you
like,
can't do it.
You can't do it.
Well, this documentary
actually
shows
sort of like manages
that
to...
Beatlemania, and this is something I did not know. When Beatlemania came to the South, and they were on their tour leg of the South, they were going to be playing a stadium in Florida that was going to be a segregated stadium.
Yeah.
And Paul McCartney, to his credit, talk about living dangerously in the South. He gets up there and he just says, well, this segregation thing, he says, it's stupid. It's just stupid. I don't understand it. He says, we don't want to play to a segregated audience. And doggone it, do you know that they desegregated that concert, and very shortly after that, segregation at sports stadiums in the South came to an end.
Wow! I had no idea.
Know that.
I had no idea.
Paul McCartney, bless his heart, he is
right
there on film
Very good.
at this press conference, and he's just looking around, and he's just saying, I don't understand any of this. It's stupid. I think it's just stupid.
British,
Can you imagine?
There's
some American back in the South
and
standing up saying, this is stupid.
Brits
You would have been
who were basically copying. All as they did was copped American.
Oh,
Like all of those bands, they all did. That's all what they all did. They were all copying. And especially the Liverpool bands, because the Liverpool was a seaport, and all of these records from the United States were coming into Liverpool.
International influence going in and out of Liverpool, also very, very close to Europe.
Exactly.
So anyway, I just thought I'd let you know that was one thing that, as a direct result of the Beatles playing the South.
That is like you can't.
And that's all it took. It took one band. It took one, and the thing is, it's all about the promoters. It was like, well, we gotta desegregate that stadium. We can't, you got that.
That's all about money.
It's all about the money, of course. So that was
you don't want to be on the wrong side of history,
that was the first,
and you don't want to lose a lot of money.
No,
those two things will really change things very quickly.
So that was the first hammer blow that brought down the segregated stadiums.
That is so amazing.
It
was like everyone has their personal story, so there's but everyone, like, when they're coming to this realization that something is going on.
Oh yeah.
And I was just. Okay, this was like on a comment board last week, and I don't know what I can't even remember what the reference was at this point. But a younger person, he made the comment. This guy is CP304, he calls himself, and he said, "I feel like I missed so much by being born in the mid-'70s. Now, stop right there for just a minute. Think about someone who was born in the mid-'70s. That means...
You would have missed a fuck of a lot.
You would have missed a fuck of a lot. But just think how old that person is today. That person is not a young person.
No.
Well, a middle-aged person.
Well, you know what, Steve? I often think to myself, I also, of course, needless to say, I also missed getting drafted and getting my ass shot off in Vietnam. But I often think to myself, when I think about, 1965, a year like that, things are really starting to happen. I'm fucking 8 years old, and I'm sitting in my fucking fourth grade class, or third grade classroom, reading Dick and Jane books. And all of this really incredible stuff in the world is happening, and I see, sometimes that makes me, sometimes I wish I'd been older when some of that stuff started happening, but then on the other hand, I didn't have to fucking...
Well, that's the thing.
I didn't have to fucking go and get killed in Vietnam.
Craig,
right?
When I think, because of course I just this was to me Valhalla.
Yeah.
Going to the Sunset Strip.
Of course.
And going to the Haight-Ashbury. Okay, that has permanently dented my brain, and for the life, I will never, ever, ever have the sense of cultural yearning that I had starting when I was 10 years old. And, because the Beatles were happening. And I remember this explicitly. It was like 1964. And yeah, and it was like, so I would have been in the 3rd grade. I was in the 3rd grade when the Beatles hit. And my sister was 2 years older. And this arrived because everything started happening so quickly. It was kind of like Omicron. It was just like this tidal wave. Well, I remember at our elementary school, over by the older kids' classes, like the 6th graders and the 5th graders, we had this big plum tree.
Right.
And there was all this very nicely manicured lawn to sit under the tree. And I remember all the older girls, would sit there and trade and look at Beatle cards. And so there was this circle. It was kind of like a, like the covered wagon circled around. And I was the only boy. And I would walk around the girls. My sister was one of them.
Yeah.
But they weren't paying attention to me. And they were all looking at Beatle cards. And I'm just thinking, I want to be with the girls. That's when it started, And it's like, of course, and then at home, of course, it just was a talk between my sister and Janet Murphy,
right.
The girl who lived across the street. It was Beatles, 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 24/7. Okay. In the summer of 1965, it was literally the day before the 4th grade started. My sister and I went to see a matinee of Help.
You've told me this story.
It had just come out.
You've told me this story.
And all of a sudden, it was my reality had changed. Because it was kind of a day like this, and then it rained, and I remember having a pellet gun after coming home. And there's a big puddle of rainwater in front of our house, and shooting at my reflection in the puddle, thinking, I want to be in a rock band.
Well, I remember you told me that story the first time you told me that. You said it was just like being injected into this super fun world, and then the next day it's like, what the fuck? Here I am sitting back in my fucking 3rd grade classroom with a bunch of kids, and you're thinking to yourself, there is this whole
there's a better life out
world out there, and I'm sitting in this fucking classroom.
Well, it's like, and of course it just sort of amplified, and everything started so happy. But for me, a real turning point, because that was all very contained. You're just watching media. And of course we had this influx of media coming in that I was just totally, okay. Then what happened was, in February of 1966, we got a brand new car. It was the first time we ever had a new car. A 1966 Olds Cutlass.
Yep.
It was basically, it was like a street rod dressed as a family coupe. That thing was just it was a muscle car.
Oh, yeah.
Plain and simple, it was a muscle car. Okay. I remember, and the one thing that was, okay, we were just all over the moon. We were so happy to have this really spacious, touring salon. It was just great. And it had compared to our older cars, which were
it must have been like a spaceship.
It had an incredible sound system.
Yeah.
And I remember coming home from my grandmother's house, and it had speakers in the back that it was such an audio-wise, it was such a marked improvement. And we're driving in the dark down San Gabriel Boulevard, just a mile from where I live, and hearing Mona by the Rolling Stones. And it's just really dark. And I'm like, it's like black magic to me. It's just like black magic. Well, that summer we drove up to San Francisco.
Yep.
And there it was. We're in San Francisco, and this was at the beginning of all that. It was the summer before the summer of love, but it was already going on. Because I remember, it was the radio was really great, but we drove to Marin County. We went out to the Muir Beach by the Muir Woods, and we're walking on the beach, and I see these hippies like real hippies on the beach, but they're like proto-hippies. And I'm, like in my little sensible sweater with a nice haircut, and I'm just like this. First of all, the landscape is incredible. I'm at the beach in Marin County, which is so much different than the beach in LA. And I've seen this hippie boy and girl, and I'm like, it was like Martians walking on the beach.
They were like a different species.
When I went back to school, I went back to the 6th grade, and I started telling everybody, and it was like I went to Oz. People didn't believe me when I was telling me, except my teacher, Mr. Watkins, because he knew. He goes, yeah, I know, I hear that there's all of this stuff going on in San Francisco. And we had a bulletin board that he used to clip out articles out of Time magazine, so he'd be interested in current events, and pin up stuff. And there's like some pictures of hippies. I said, them! I saw them.
I saw hippies.
Well, the following year we went up again in the Summer of Love, and of course at that time things had really torn loose.
Yeah.
And of course all the posters.
Now, why did you guys go to San Francisco? Why did you go up there?
Okay, here's the deal. It took me a long time to figure out this, because first of all we had a reliable car. Okay, that we could go someplace far away without being anxious about the car breaking down, because our cars were always breaking down.
That's the way it always was in the old days with the old crappy.
But see, the thing is, later, I figured out what it was. My parents had this thing about it, because when my father's ship came in, she flew up and met him. It was a general transport coming back from Korea.
Came into Richmond?
It came into the port of San Francisco. Under the Golden Gate Bridge. So my parents had this very romantic memory of San Francisco, but they had never been able to go back because we never had a dependable car. So that's the second we got a dependable car, it was my parents. Boom, because they loved San Francisco. It was about that period for them.
Sure.
And we reaped the benefit.
Sure.
We reaped the benefit because that first year, 1966, I had no clue. And then all of a sudden, we drive into San Francisco in August of 1966, and I'm like, what in the world? First of all, I had never in my life worn a sweater in August. And it's like cold.
Yeah, it's cold here. Wait a minute.
Well, that following summer, 1967, of course, there was just, things were berserk.
Yeah.
It was utterly berserk.
Yeah.
With hippies everywhere.
Yeah.
And then the thing that the big tape, of course the radio was really great, but, hearing bands that you did not hear in Los Angeles, because they were local bands. But the posters. And so, coming back, and just before the 7th grade started, Life magazine came out with the magazine about the poster boom.
I wonder if I have that I've got some really nice old Life magazines I've got to start going through.
And so when I started flipping through it, and they had the sort of the all the mugshots of all the guys, and there was this one of Stanley Mouse, and he had hair like me, French boots up to his knees, glasses.
Right.
And I was saying, and there's a picture of Rick Griffin sitting in a window framed by all his posters. And I said, that's what I want. It was that simple. So that Christmas, I got my mom got me my first set of paints. And it was and I went to town. And I've never stopped.
There you go.
And it's I will never be able, as long as I live another 100 years, I will never have a feeling, nothing else. Going to Rome and seeing the Sistine Chapel is minuscule. Going to New York and going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art is minuscule compared to seeing those posters, and because I didn't understand. It's where do these things come from? And I said, people make them, and that was sort of a revelation to me, because I had no idea. And I said, "You mean people make these?" I was like, "I got to get busy. I got to get busy because that's what I'm going to do."
You know what's interesting? I was just there are so few. Like, I don't know about your family. You may have more photographs, but there are so few photographs of me doing anything in childhood. I mean, there are like,
we have tons.
I mean, like, I had this beloved treehouse that I was in. There's like not one single photograph of me in my treehouse.
Well,
This is back when you only got the camera out for special occasions and you lined everybody up and everybody posed. And the thing that's interesting, Steve, is one of the things I started doing, and I hadn't thought about this in years, I found a few fragments out in a box of childhood drawings. I used to be the kid at school that they would sort of give me a little chunk of the bulletin board, and I would sort of create little collages and little things. Do you know that there are nobody ever took a photograph?
No one thought of it.
It was just like, and I found some fragments of this little Halloween display that I'd made where I'd drawn a little house and cut it out, and I had cut some things out of it was the prototype for my collage art, except I didn't know it. But doggone it, Steve, when I was a kid, I would build things and then get bored with them and destroy them.
Yeah.
And do you know that
I saw your little graveyard.
I took that picture myself.
Yes.
I also have a picture of a little haunted house I built.
Yes.
Doggone it, Steve, today, a kid on a 5-minute outing in the park with his parents, the parent would take more pictures of their kids in that 5 minutes than exists than I have of my entire childhood.
Okay.
Because people just didn't take, and people were busy. We didn't have anybody in the family that had any photography skills.
Okay. Where I just came from, Monster Park, which is real close to my house, and it's a really well-maintained little park that people come from all over because what it has this like sand pit with all these fanciful animals created out of cement.
I've seen that. Shemaine and I, we've been down there.
Yeah, that's where I go and exercise.
I've seen that
every day. I go
it's
there.
It's very cool.
And so I'm literally right across. The outside exercise equipment is literally right across from there. So that is like what I'm witnessing is all these young families there with the kids, and the kids are going nuts.
Oh, and they're just taking picture after
and everyone's phones up,
Yeah.
phones up constantly. Well, this is what we have witnessed is this thing. See, one thing that I'm eternally grateful for is my father, because when he was stationed in Japan, he bought an Argus C3 rangefinder, which was for like a consumer camera.
I have one. That's my first camera. That's my childhood camera.
That's right.
You know where my mom bought that? My mom bought that right down the street. There used to be a place called Bob's Camera. Steve, when I was in the 7th grade, my mom bought me an Argus C3 rangefinder. It was $14. It was $14. It was used. That's the camera I took. Actually, that's the camera I took when we drove around the Southwest.
Is that?
Those pictures. Because it has the thing where you turn the little dial.
Oh, yeah.
The images. Well, those are the greatest cameras.
I have it.
Completely, nothing automatic. You have to set
it's just a
But it takes amazing pictures. And
it has a really great lens. I have the camera. I have my dad's camera. Well, anyway, that was our camera.
Yeah.
From the time my dad was stationed in Asia.
Really great camera.
So all the way up until the time that it broke, and he never got it refixed. He never got it fixed. Instead, I remember we were going up to Sequoias, and my parents said, we need a camera. So they bought a Kodak Instamatic, which I also have.
Right.
So, and actually, and I will say this to the benefit of my father. See, he shot exclusively from when he was stationed in Japan in the late 40s all the way up to the time that the damn thing broke. He shot Kodacolor transparency. So, when you print those, and they're all stored archivally. Fuck, man, these pictures.
The colors on those are incredible.
I just like I take the pictures yesterday. So we have the most ridiculous pile of pictures. It's just like looking at old Life magazine.
Oh, yeah.
That was us. Mm-hmm. In our suburban, our aspirational suburban ranch house with like perfect vinyl furniture. And like perfect little, me and my sister. My parents really, really were aspirational. They wanted to be like a magazine, and I'm so happy they were.
Well, you know, Steve, this gets down to something. This gets down to a real primal thing I've been thinking about. All the people, like there's a conceit or there's a thing, like, okay, most of the people we know, we all came from these sort of middle-class suburban families, for the most part, what you think of as kind of normal families. You know, the father was the breadwinner. The mom may or may not have had work outside the home.
Right.
But, and all of us, we all grew up, but there was this other thing that we were hungry for. And the thing is, none of us, a lot of kids got it from sports. We weren't sports people. So we never had that as an outlet. Like for me, sports was just anathema. Sports was toxic. Sports was where somebody threw the ball and hit you in the head and then laughed at you. That's what sports was for me. Sports was just toxic. It was toxic.
I was a sports guy.
Were you a sports guy?
Oh yeah. I played baseball, organized, and it wasn't just street games. No, I played baseball and I played football and I was on the wrestling team. But there was this other thing. And you know why I did it? It was not because I liked to be part of the group.
Of course.
That's all I wanted to do, was be with the guys. I was a real social kid. And so I was not good at sports. But, those types of teams did not...
that whole thing where they stand, where they split, you pick who do you want to be on your team, and then you've got the kid that's left that nobody wants. They don't even do that anymore in school.
Yeah.
That kind of shit. They don't even do that anymore.
Yeah. I actually got to last week, and there's this guy, his name is Uncle Michael. He has a show called Hinky Dinky Time. That his theme song is from this like grocery store called Hinky Dinky Mart, someplace in the Midwest. And so he has this really great show that comes on Friday morning.
And what's it on?
It's also on WFMU. Of course, that's the only thing I listen to now.
Hinky Dinky Time.
It's called Hinky Dinky Time. So what he does is every year he does a listener request show. So, and he goes, okay, this is the way you can do it. You can phone it in, or you can write an email. And of course, write an email. I want to hear my own voice on the radio. So what people are just talking about, well, I like this record, I like that record. I say, no. This is an opportunity to perform. So I tell the little story, very compressed. I leave out a lot of details because it has to be kind of like brevity is very important. I tell the story of I was getting ready. This was like in July of 1966, getting ready for my baseball team was having its swim party. And I was in my bedroom getting ready to go to the swim party. And I had a Zenith clock radio, on the shelf. And 7 and 7 Is by Love came on the radio. And it was as if someone lit a pile of fireworks on my bed. I just kind of like craned my head. And that was the first record I ever bought with my own money. Well, I tell the little story, and then Michael goes directly into the song. And first of all, it's like nothing anyone else has requested.
Right.
And people go nuts because the song is just like a hurricane. It's just like a tidal wave. And this is, I can only tell, it only happens once.
Right.
You buy your first record.
Right.
And it just so happened that was my first record. And it's gone on to become this iconic record that's looked at. This was the beginning of punk, but no one knew it then. But it was one of those records that has that status because it's just absolutely furious. It didn't sound like anything else on the radio. And at 10 years old, I knew. I didn't know, but I knew. I intuitively knew. And so it was like, oh. So, a lot of people commented on it, and Michael commented on it. And Franco, that was a great story. No one else used the opportunity to tell a personal story about something that really twisted their fucking head off. And I think, what is the point? I'm thinking like I'm not one of those people that have these like, I got a Charles Mingus record. It's like, no, nothing like that.
Well, I got to tell you, there are two childhood things that twisted my head off. The first one was on Saturday afternoon. It was on television. It was one of those movies they showed all the time. The movie Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh, of course.
The famous sequence by
Harryhausen. Ray Harryhausen.
Right. The famous fighting skeleton sequence.
Oh my God!
When I was a little boy and I saw that, it changed my life. It was like, I don't know how they did that, but I want to do that. And I'll tell you what, the addendum to that, the bookend to that story is many, many years later, when he was very close to death. I met Ray Harryhausen, and in the book, I opened up to the page there's a page that folds out, and it has all the little skeleton figures all lined up. I got him to autograph that page. Now that's, talk about having something suitable for framing.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to cut it out of the book. And then the other thing that totally changed my life was when I was 10 years old, we went to the movies. We went to see Fantastic Voyage. And when I saw
I did too. I was in the sixth grade. Yeah.
This to me, that was going to see Help. And then the next day, sitting in the fourth grade going, there's this whole world out there, and I'm stuck in this fucking classroom.
That's right.
That was that for me. After I saw Fantastic Voyage, I remember laying in bed, and I could just see everything.
Oh my God! I remember that.
I laid in bed, and I watched that movie in my mind. I must have watched that movie 100 times. I was 10 years old. And when I saw that movie, it just blew the roof off.
It just see, the thing is, when I think about the 60s,
man,
I think about, there was no time in my life, until, of course, I was maybe in my 20s. I saw because my parents loved to go to the movies, and they wanted to take us. And I saw so many movies. Okay, here's the scenario. Like everybody, we had a black and white television.
Of course.
So we'd go to the movies and we'd see a movie in color that was as big as that building. And all of a sudden, you're realizing movies were what it was. It was like something. It was like dropping acid before I dropped acid. It was like something that was so overwhelming that was making this incredible impression.
I can remember literally the first time I ever saw an image projected on a movie screen. It was down at the Academy Theater. It was down in Colorado Boulevard.
Yeah, the old Academy.
The old
Academy. The Dome of Stars.
It was where they would, I think a year later they would show Mary Poppins there, and the line would be around the block.
Oh, yeah.
We went to see the movie Thomasina, which was a Walt Disney film.
Yeah, I never saw Thomasina.
Patrick McGowan. I think it might have been the little girl that ended up in Mary Poppins. It might have been her.
Yeah.
About the cat that dies and comes back. Well, the first image. Okay, you remember you go to the movie theater, you'd walk in.
Yeah.
They'd have the lobby, they had the full size lobby.
I remember the old
and then
Academy.
You would open up the big double doors.
Yeah.
And you would walk into the theater. Well, we went in, and I can't remember if we bought, but then my mom opened up the big doors. My sister and my mom and I went down the aisle, and on the screen, and it looked like it looked like I was looking at the size. It looked like I felt like I was looking at a skyscraper.
Right.
On the screen was this enormous image of Patrick McGowan. And I can even remember, I think he was wearing like a cardigan sweater, and I think they were outdoors, and he was talking to someone. And I just remember walking down the aisle to get in our seat, and this image of this man, it was just like it was on the side of a building. And that was the first image I ever saw projected on a movie screen. It was like, wow.
It's
really
it can't. I mean there has to be comparables because you're start when you're a tabula rasa when you're a little kid. You're just a blank slate, and things. You're receiving information for the first time, and there's a first time for everything.
Oh, yeah.
When you're just a receptor, and you're just bringing information in, and it makes some sort of an impression about you. Well, first of all, that whole disconnect because, most people, because I remember very clearly the first time I saw a colored TV. And it was considerably after we had been going to the movies for a year. I remember we went over to my father's accountant's house, Gene Talion, and they had like this enormous, and we saw Bonanza. That's the first thing I ever saw on color TV. It was like, oh, wow.
Just, yeah. But
seen Haas in color, Dan Blocker.
all the sets and things all just looked like they were just made out of cardboard.
I know they were.
Bonanza. That was the big flagship show, Bonanza in color, and at the beginning of each...
I love the beginning, where it's just like the map. It was like the map of the territory on fire.
Well, and the thing is, in the fall, Lauren Green would come out, and he would give a little talk about all the latest Chevrolets. And he would walk around, in his cowboy outfit, he would walk around the showroom and point out the merits of these marvelous new Chevrolets, which of course were in color. And then, here we go, right into Bonanza. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when my mom told me that Dan Blocker had died. I was outside. You remember the pool in my mom's backyard?
Oh, yeah.
I was out on the pool deck, and I had the thing, and I was vacuuming the pool. And I was right there opposite where the sliding door was, and it was about... It was during high school. This is probably about 1973, maybe 74 when Dan Blocker died. I was out there vacuuming the pool, and my mom slid the door open, and it was still light. It was probably about 4:30 or 5, and my mom slid the door open and said, "They just announced on the news that Dan Blocker died from complications at gallbladder surgery complications." And I can just remember thinking to myself, like, Haas dead? Well, I remember specifically the first time thinking about the fact that someone had committed suicide. There was the actor Nick Adams. He was on Combat. He was also in Nick Adams. He was in No Time for Sergeants.
Who did he play on Combat?
He was one of the guys on Combat, but he was also in the movie No Time for Sergeants.
Okay.
He was the sidekick. Nick Adams.
I have to look him up to figure out
who he was. The first human being. Okay, I didn't know. I didn't know that there was such a thing as people killing themselves. I didn't even that just seems so. It was just
not a concept
the concept that you would kill yourself.
Right.
Well, the fact that A, why would you, and B, is it even physically possible to kill yourself? And I remember walking home. I had just learned that Nick Adams had died he had committed suicide. I remember walking home along from and I even remember the patch of sidewalk I was on. It was on El Molino Street, about a block south of Altadena Elementary School. And I can remember walking along and just thinking in my mind about Nick Adams. Like, but that means that he's dead, so he's not on the earth anymore. So I guess he's not going to be making any more TV shows or anything. But I can just remember thinking about the concept of being dead.
I have to figure out, because I was like a real adept of combat, but I don't remember who. I remember like Jason.
I know
Vic Morrow
was on combat.
Who was Sergeant Saunders.
Was Sergeant.
And Rick Jason was Lieutenant Henley.
Yeah, I'm not sure who Nick Adams was. I'm pretty sure he
Little
was on
John.
combat.
There was Kirby. And then they were a small squadron. And it was like all of those guys were like, you know, I used to love that show more than anything.
Combat.
And you know, when Christy moved to LA, and this was just in 1976, and basically she was just kind of abducted. She was just at home watching TV, and Carolyn and Charlotte Caffey, who was in the Go-Go's. And Geza X and Joe Ramirez, who was actually at the time, they were, I guess it was before they were the Go-Go's, obviously. There was a time before, but, you know, she was Geza's girlfriend. And they came in, and Carolyn, they came and kidnapped in a big station wagon. It was Charlotte's parents' station wagon. And they came and got Christy, and they moved Christy into Charlotte's apartment in East Hollywood.
Right.
Because Charlotte Caffey was from this very strict Catholic family. And, you know, Charlotte was, you know, had all these guys.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So she needed a Dodge. She needed a beard that she had a girlfriend as her roommate. Because, you know, her parents would not have approved this. Well, Charlotte's dad was the producer of Combat.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So did they live in the valley someplace?
No, they lived in Glendale.
Oh.
They lived in a nice area of
Her
Glendale.
dad was the producer of Combat.
Yeah. Charlotte's father.
It's kind of crazy.
It's
man.
really funny.
Wow.
But I used to love Combat when I was a kid. I mean, just anything about fighting the Krauts.
Oh, well, the thing is, they had the desert, they had the Jeep, the desert, Jeeps, and machine guns.
Well, that was Rat Patrol.
Oh, that's right. You know what? I'm mixed up. Rat Patrol. There was Rat Patrol was set in the desert.
Yeah, it was North
Africa. That was North Africa. And Combat
was the show. It was in the Verdun. It was in the woods of France.
For some reason, all this time in my mind, I have been thinking
You've conflated the two.
Okay, maybe Nick Adams was on Rat Patrol.
Okay, this was like
maybe he was on Rat Patrol.
Okay, I see. Because something George, the guy who wore like the Aussie hat with buttoned up, he was kind of like the squadron leader.
Now this was on Rat Patrol.
This was Rat Patrol.
Rat Patrol.
Okay. Then there was the two guys. There was the guy that wore like a Civil War hat. And you know the premise. Okay, here's the thing. It was so specious. The guys in Rat Patrol, because there were two Jeeps, and they were always going over the sand dunes of North Africa by themselves, and like taking on like a whole battalion of Krauts
by themselves.
But they had like two like Willys Jeeps with like 60 caliber like machine guns on posts and fighting all these hapless Germans.
Yeah.
You know, and they were just like running circles around the Krauts.
That's right. The Krauts.
Yeah. The Krauts.
The Krauts.
You know what it was always is they always foiled the Germans. Rat Patrol. See, Rat Patrol, I was already a little older, and it was like I was already a little more.
I just remember there was always at least one kid in school that had a Rat Patrol lunch pail.
Of course.
Rat Patrol lunch
Rat
pail.
Patrol.
Rat Patrol.
Rat Patrol. Oh, boy. I mean, you know, this is like, Greg, this is such a deep well.
Oh, it just never ends.
It just never
you go
ends
down
because
this rabbit
you know,
hole.
I see me personally. I am so oversaturated with information.
Well, I'm the same way because I'm
Comes
just like
at me,
I'm
and
just
it's
like a
nothing.
sponge.
Nothing really makes a dent anymore.
And I listen in the course of a week.
Oh, wow.
I absorb so much media. I mean, you're talking about LA Times every day, New York Times every day, All Things Considered NPR every day, McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour every day, plus various podcasts, plus I have this amazing
Whatever books
app.
you're reading.
Well, then I have this new thing, this app called Autumn that I got through the New York Times. It's an aggregator site that they post listenable audio versions of really, really amazing articles from just a plethora of different magazines. So yeah, in any given day, I am just spending so many hours just absorbing media.
I know.
And then that's aside from whatever current history book I'm reading or whatever.
Exactly.
So there is just this ridiculous amount of stuff that just
I'm basically
starts
incapable
to stack up.
of really absorbing even a fraction of what's out there. I'm just incapable. I can't.
Well, that's what editorial. See, this is the thing. This is the whole concept of editorial control. You need to go to sources where you trust them editorially. That if something's important enough
Right.
or interesting enough, they're going to thrust it out there for you to see.
Right.
That's the
Yeah, it's like we're living now in such an expanded universe of information. And because there's so many like information generators, they're just like exponentially somewhere. It's kind of like the vastness of the universe. It just keeps going and going and going.
If you think about it, the number of lifetimes, books and movies and everything, the number of lifetimes that it expands. I mean, here's a for instance. I was not alive during the American Civil War. I wasn't born until 1957, and yet in my mind, I can instantly be at the Battle of Little Round Top at Gettysburg. I can be hiding behind a tree, reloading my musket.
That's right. With
And
a lead ball.
then turning and then shooting
From a powder horn.
from a powder horn, and then turning and firing and shooting a Confederate. See, in my mind, think about this. Think about people living in the Middle Ages. All you knew about was the dirt under your feet, the food you ate,
And the perimeter of your village.
What parents, your
farm.
village perimeter, and then occasionally, maybe there'd be a little traveling minstrel show, or there'd be a
visitor.
But then, of course, you got to realize that on top of that, though, everything you saw and heard was filtered for you and policed by the church. So the whole idea is if the village priest came around and he told someone to do something, you better or told you to quit doing something, you better damn well obey.
Yeah.
And the whole you think about, like, okay, we went to see, we were in New York City in 1985, we went and saw the big art show, the Renaissance painter, what's his? Caravaggio.
Yeah.
The average human being in that day, do you think average peasant would ever have seen any of those paintings? Of course not. How would you have access? How would you have access to any of that?
I'm glad you brought Caravaggio.
You wouldn't have access to any of that stuff.
Because, well, first of all, that trip to New York, of all the trips, I made quite a few trips to New York, but that one, for me, resonates as something special, even more so than the first time I ever went there. Because Michelle Hunovan and I drove to New York City and camped the entire way.
And you told me you did nothing but fight.
That's what all we did is fight in the car the whole time.
You just fought.
So then we get to New York, and we basically go our own ways. And I'm like, oh, Jesus. That's a good thing that's over. But then it was fairly cold.
Yeah.
And I just remember because what happened was I immediately got, prior to you getting there, it was the type of thing that it's like I had to do something because I was staying with my friends.
Right.
And Ruth, who she had a basement studio on 10th Street in the West Village, at 10th Street and 6th Avenue. And she goes, well, she was sharing the studio, but it was just an open basement. And I'm saying, what can I do for you guys? This is so great that you let me stay here. And say, okay, well, how, we know you're a carpenter, so it's like, you want to build a partition wall. So by myself, I built like a partition wall the length of the basement. And, and the way I did it is, okay, first of all, it's like, okay, I'm going to do a project in New York City, a construction project.
Right.
Which was this incredible. I didn't have a tools, I didn't have nothing. So I had to go around in New York City and rent.
Oh my gosh.
All the tools. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had to have all the material ordered and dumped on the sidewalk in the village and hustle it all downstairs, and I had to do everything myself. And that's what I did. Because, I was like, 29 years old?
Yeah.
So that's like, no problem, I can do this.
Yeah.
But it was like there was a learning curve to doing in this completely alien self.
Sure.
Okay, we had driven across the country, camped the entire way, and it was just now we laugh about it. It was just high adventure, but it was like, and I'm so glad I did it. I was so glad we had such a good, bad time driving across America and camping when it's like freezing outside.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then building this project. So by the time I met you, I was absolutely filthy. Well, I'd take a bath, but
we were at the Mayflower Hotel, remember?
That's right. I met you.
At the Mayflower.
Well, this is what happened prior to you getting there, I think. Okay, so I moved out of John and Ruth's place. And, but I wasn't going to see them again. So what I did, I took all my shit and I stashed it at the bus station at the Port Authority. And then I spent all this time till you showed up, like walking around in a blizzard. And I was really, really sick.
Oh, that's right.
I had gotten because I was exposure, because I had been outside, literally outside for since we left LA, and it was really cold. It was February. Well, I got really, really sick, and I was walking around in Midtown Manhattan with burning fever. And so I staggered into the big library on Fifth Avenue. It's like the main library, and they have right in the entrance of the, it's this really grand edifice, and there's all these cement benches in the foyer of the library, and I was just feverish, and I just kind of and I passed out.
Did you really?
I passed out.
Wow.
And I was woken up when a cop came and hit me with his nightstick.
Wow.
He's out of the bum. I looked like a bum.
And you were in the public library?
I was in the, and he goes, and it was like a cop with the navy blue jacket with 2 courses of buttons. He hit me with his nightstick. He goes, you can't have your feet off the ground. Because this is where bums go. It's freezing outside. Bums, they'd have library, they'd have
he
cops.
says you have to have your feet on the ground.
Yeah, and he hit me hard. And I just staggered out into the snow. Well, I don't know. I guess we met at the lobby of the Mayflower.
Yeah. We met
Is that where we met?
As far as I know, we met in the Mayflower.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Then you and I, all of a sudden, then that normalized thing.
Then you had a nice warm room.
I had a warm
and a bed
room,
to crawl
take a hot shower. And everything. My clothes were still all dirty, but it was like, okay, at least, I started gradually, I had a place to go. And I wasn't working anymore. I wasn't driving across the country. All of a sudden, things
just sort of crashed.
And then you and I started taking it. It's like, well, let's just start. I was sick as fuck, but I wasn't going to let that stop me.
Well, I remember the first morning we went out to walk around, you know, you're in that hotel and you just see people hustling by the windows, and you have no idea how fucking cold it is outside. And we went outside. It was about 25 degrees.
That's right.
Steve, I remember we got about a block and a half, and it was just like we had to go into a chock full of nuts to warm up. And
yes,
get
we went
coffee.
into the chock
And
full of nuts on Broadway.
Steve, we're walking away from that hotel, and we make it about a block and a half. And I am in my mind, I am thinking like, this is insanity. How do people do this?
You know why we
How do people do this?
You know why we
It's
found
crazy.
that chock full of nuts? Because I knew that place. Because
was
previously, when I was in New York, walking around in the freezing
It's
cold,
so
and I would do
cold.
precisely that. I'd said, there was this chock full of nuts because I would be going to the museums.
Yeah.
And I said, I can't stand, and I'm wearing like this huge coat.
Oh, I mean,
and it's like, but I'm the
ridiculous.
pussy from California.
It was ridiculous.
And I would go into the chock full of nuts, which was this completely, it was coming to this streamlined, bland environment.
But
you
it
know,
was
it was just
warm,
really
and they had
polished,
coffee.
and warm and hot coffee.
all you needed.
And it was like that chock full of nuts. It was on Broadway. It was over by the Whitney Museum. And that was like a refuge for me. You know, when I was out walking around out there, and it was like, you know, previously, when I was in New York previously. So, yeah, and then we sort of started doing something, and that was one of the major things. To me, I remember we saw, you know, we went to the Metropolitan and saw the Caravaggio, which was the flagship
the big
show.
show.
And the Caravaggio paintings had never come to America.
That's right. That was incredible.
That was
Those paintings.
by then it was March.
That was
of
incredible.
1985.
That was amazing.
And then we saw the John Androwski show.
And
Well, you know,
the
it's like years later, of course, I went to Rome, and you know, there's Caravaggios all over Rome. They're almost like Starbucks coffee.
Right.
You could go into a church and there's another one. Oh, I saw that in New York. You know, it's like it was just so great, and we had so much fun. And you know what? And there is the pictures, the photographs. And it's like the movie.
The movie.
That is this iconic thing that you compressed.
Well, and you know the
into.
thing that's interesting
That
too
was
is
what we
now
did.
the movie, of course, is pre 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
The movie, as time has gone by, it's got almost kind of an LJ quality. When you watch
Yeah,
the
it
movie
does.
and you hear the music and you see the imagery, and then when we're on the ferry and you see the you know, I am so fucking tired of all this fucking noise.
Oh, I hate it.
And honestly, the loud vehicle thing, I've had enough. I think people ought to just start fucking cracking down and saying enough. We don't need these fucking
And these dicks,
these
total
dicks
dicks
these
that
total
are
motorcycles.
That, okay,
and
you know
cars.
what?
We don't
it's
need
like
that.
with that thing that just
That guy ought to
like,
get a ticket.
That aspect of car culture is like,
that-
fuck those people.
And you know, there's so, and again, it's the noise pollution. There is so fucking much noise without the guy on the Harley. Bup, 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 bup. You know, like, okay, I get it. You know.
You're
But
not
anyway.
a Hell's Angel.
But anyway,
I always
getting-
think that these people, because they see all this like vintage biker, when bikers, it meant something.
Yeah.
To be like, if it's like, to terrorize the city on a
now
Harley.
it means
It's
nothing.
like, it's old news. It happened 60
Yeah,
years
get
ago.
over it.
Get a grip. You're not a Hell's Angel. No.
That's what you make.
You're no rebel. You bought that thing off the showroom. You didn't build your own
Yeah,
bike.
and really the noise
You're not a
thing,
motorcycle outlaw.
the
Get the
noise
fuck
thing.
out of here.
The urban noise thing, that is like the next.
Yeah, and that's okay. Here's another thing.
That's the next thing that needs to get tackled is this
Okay.
noise thing.
That's another thing.
Noise
okay.
thing is just
another thing that people
pain in
can't
the ass.
see. I lived within bicycle distance to the number one In-N-Out Burger. So I remember, and this is when the Hells Angels.
Oh yeah.
This was like 1965, 66, when they were really becoming this quote-unquote menace, right? Because they had gotten all this publicity. They had been around since the late 40s, but, you know, in the mid-60s, they really started becoming important. And I remember I would be, like, with my dad, and then there were, like maybe, like, 10 Hell's Angels would be like zooming up the freeway, and it was really like, you know, it was really like sort of like the earth had opened,
Well,
and these demons from hell had come.
And it was like, people, if you're hearing and seeing this, we're putting you guys all on notice.
Yeah.
It's like, we're here, deal with it. And then you just waited for them to pass, and they did. And that was,
Well, what it was Memorial Day weekend, 1966. And since there was a Monday holiday, and typically what I would do is there was a little market called the Tootin' Totem that was right next to, and I would ride my bike because they had like the best spin rack of stuff like squirt guns and like penny candy kind of stuff, and I'd always just go over there. Well, it was right next to the In-N-Out Burger one day, and it was like that weekend, and there were like about 20 bikes lined up against the curb. Hell's Angels.
at the market.
At the In-N-Out Burger.
Oh, at the In-N-Out Burger.
Well, it was a Memorial Day run, and they were all out. And I thought, for years, it was because the Purdue Angels would come straight up the 10th, and that's what you see all the time.
Right.
But later I found out that what it was right over by where I lived, there was an angel house. It was called Halfway in Between. There's a book, it's called Halfway in Between Venice and Purdue. There was this house, it's right over, the house isn't there anymore because they knocked it down because they built the Home Depot. But it was just like about a mile from my house, and it's like, it was the halfway point when where the Venice Angels and the San Bernardino Angels were going this way and that. It was the pit stop. And I never really understood why where I grew up was crawling with Hell's Angels. And back then, the Hell's Angels, it wasn't a chic thing. They really looked like Vikings. You know, and the bikes they were riding, you know, they were like real deal. It was the real deal. It was the real deal.
And you did not mess with these guys.
You know, and it's just like, no, of course they didn't. I mean, as a little kid, I would just go by and I would see these guys, and they all had like, you know, like colors, long hair, filthy, and they were all filthy.
Yeah.
You know, covered with grease, and they were a true menace. You know, and it's like that became this thing where then they started getting this weird sort of infamy. You know, when they started, then all the biker movies. Then the biker movies started coming out after because, you know, it was like what is it?
Well, and then you had the whole Hunter Thompson thing, and
then the Hunter Thompson book, and all of the, you know, and all the American International biker flicks, and, you know, Hell's Angels on Wheels, you know, the one with Peter Fonda and Nancy Sinatra, whatever. You know, and like that it was just like that. It was like all of a sudden they were sort of like these celebrities.
Yeah.
But at first they were like, "What the fuck is this?" Anyway, we could go on and on and on, but I'm gonna head home because I'm getting kind of hungry.
And I'm getting to the point where I'm gonna have to go ride to my. It's funny, you know, when you ride your bike a lot, you kind of have all your secret locations where you pee.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, it's just weird little out of the way places. Like there's an alley back here
behind the little house over there. That's where I pee.
Well, and the thing is, there's this place that's empty on the weekends where you go down this. There's this parking lot, and there's this little cubby hole in the back where they stash the dumpster. Sometimes I just go back there to pee.
You know, when I was first, the diabetes was first, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I had to pee all the time. And so I was peeing just in the street.